You're listening to It Came From the Radio. You know this is Jennifer Elise Feldman, and I'm here with Neil Laird, an Emmy-nominated TV producer turned fantasy novelist with a fascination with ancient history and travel. His novels are LGBTQ+, time travel adventures that explore sexuality through the ages. He knows a lot of different things I don't know about history, and he's in Turkey right now, so welcome. Thanks so much for taking all the trouble to come.
Thank you for hooking me up from Turkey. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. All right. So I usually do these in characters, Dr. Feldy with a crazy wig on, but
Oh,
you're getting Jennifer Louise Feldman, the real girl who did go to American University. And I have this on because what is America nowadays? But that's another day, not
a
another
totally
topic.
different
He's in
topic.
Turkey. So, first question for you. Could you tell us how TV documentaries for National Geographic, Discovery, etc., get made? And maybe some little gossip behind the scenes on how we tell the truth about history? The truth? In question in quotation marks.
That's a deep, deep question to ask with, and you need more than 15 minutes to probably answer it. But in short, I do historical documentaries, mostly adventure docs. I work for Science Channel, National Geographic, so what they call the factual ones. And
Mhm.
many times they are. Many times, of course, they're not because you only have 5 or 6 days in the field to make something. So if you're going over to find a quote unquote tomb in the middle of the Egyptian desert, we already have the answer already. We know before we get there what we're going to find, we're not going to find. If you're going to dive on a shipwreck, well, you know exactly where it is. Everything's sort of pre-scripted. So
Right.
even in the nonfiction space, everything is very, very heavily produced beforehand. And then, of course, when you get there, things go wrong. You got to wing it. Somehow things are missing. You find amazing discoveries that weren't there, and that's the fun part. That's when you get a chance to actually create stuff in the field, and that's the stuff that's kept me in it for 25 years. So I think Dirty Little Secret is probably not a secret at all. It's just that what you see is so heavily produced in advance that
Mhm.
it is a sort of a simulacrum of what actually happens in the real world rather than what it is.
Now, this isn't on my questions list, but have you ever run into a situation where the production team goes with a specific idea in mind? This is a storyline, and then you discover things that really don't fit in. And how do you handle that?
Yeah, those are good questions. I've had good and bad stories. I mean, I think, real quickly, one of them I did a show called Deep Sea Detective years ago. It was a very tragic story, but each show was a shipwreck. And this one was about a shipwreck of migrants that went down off the coast of Sicily. And they had recordings of it, of a reporter from La Repubblica in Rome went out there, got an ROV, got down there, saw all these bodies of these poor people from Sri Lanka. And it was a great story. We're gonna break the story. We get there, we have the coordinates, we go out. Nobody in Sicily wants to talk to us because, of course, it's the home of the mafia. And we get out there and everything is gone. Our
Hmm.
show just suddenly froze. So one of two things happened. The mafia probably put a gun to this guy's head. The ship captain said and say, take him to the wrong coordinates. Don't show him the real thing. Or
Wow.
quite likely, they got down there and they cleaned it up before we got there. And we literally had no story to tell. So we came back
Oh,
and, we shelved the hour. Then conversely, I
wow.
did a show
Wow.
about Egypt years ago where it was about the Great Sphinx, the restoration of the Great Sphinx. And it was going to be an engineering show about how they were restoring the Sphinx, finally doing it right. And while I was there shooting what would have been a very cool show, I was called down the field in the Giza Plateau by an archaeologist because a horse had just fallen through a hole in the sand. And they found this huge tomb full of 50 or
Oh,
60 of the tomb workers, the guys who made the pyramid and the Sphinx they discover
what?
the first time. So I was there when they're opening these tombs the first time and finally putting a face on the people that had made the Sphinx and made the pyramids 4,500 years ago. That was something that was not pre-scripted, and that, of course, made that show much better.
And this was triggered by a horse falling into a hole? Is that
Yeah, because
what? Wow.
because if you've been to the Giza Plateau where the
Uh-huh.
Great Pyramids are, it's just packed with tombs and things. It's a graveyard, it's a necropolis. So the sand has swept over it, but in time they start to rot and fall apart. And
Huh.
the tombs were where the stables of the horses used to be, where people would take their tourist rides. So there's coming back to the stables one day, and by that point, the top of the tomb had become weak, and a horse just fell right through it. People had no idea it was literally under the horse's feet for 4,000 years until, voila. And then I was there when they opened
Wow.
the tomb for the first time, and we saw it's amazing. I mean, I still remember the rush of hot air that came out. Four and a half
Hot
thousand
air?
year old air inside a tomb. It brushed by me. I could still feel it on my eyebrows. It was
Oh
so
my
hot.
god. Hot.
And then a few minutes later, the pots in there, it was a very modest tomb, and it wasn't mummified. Only the wrists were mummified. So this was the workers who, I don't think they were slaves, but they certainly had tough lives, but they obviously had enough clout to be buried in a tomb, and they had a few pots and jars with them, pottery, which they can take their organs into the next world and things like that. But
Right.
when we opened it, the pots were totally put together. They were untouched. They literally were the way someone had set them in the tomb 400,000 years ago. We went away to get some camera gear. The archaeologists came back to take some photos, and all the pots had shattered.
What?
They all broke apart because it was exposed to air that it hadn't been exposed to for over 4 millennia. And in 20
Wow.
minutes, we destroyed the tomb.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I can come up with a lot of different lessons and analogies on that one, but this is a short turbo interview. So we're going to go to the next question because you have
All
a
right.
lot of stories. So now you've been debunking paranormal histories from who built the Sphinx, according to you, off the record, or maybe on the record, not aliens, to the Knights of Templar. Could you tell our listeners some of the history you've debunked?
I mean, there's so many of those shows, I think. And look, people love a good mystery, and they always say if you take away the mystery, there is no history. People love to wrap it up with an enigma. And
Mm-hmm.
I did several shows over my many decades, one called The Unexplained, which really always could be explained. But I remember one of my favorite outrageous was the Knight Templar one, where there was a guy in London, I think, who wrote a book that he claimed he had been studying the Knights Templar for 10 years. The Knights Templar were a crusader band that would take pilgrims to the Holy Land, when we stole it from the Arabs back in the mid ages, and they had their headquarters on the Temple Mount, so they had access to all the stuff that was there. Now, this guy's argument was when they were finally ran out by the Arabs, they were eventually hunted down by the French, and they were killed. They were all killed on Friday the 13th, which is where that date comes from. But anyways, I'm rambling, making a long story even longer. But this guy's argument was that the Knights Templar found sanctuary up in Scotland in a chapel called Roslin Chapel, which still exists outside of Edinburgh. A very strange chapel with all kind of pillars festooned with very oblique signs. It was so odd. That's where the Da Vinci Code takes place at the end. So it's always been sort of a Rorschach test for what goes on behind the scenes. This guy's argument was that the Knights Templar fled and were chased because they had found the head of Christ at the Temple Mount, the literal head of Christ. Oh. So they were being chased to get someone to get the head back. And they went to Roslin Chapel, and they built this chapel to keep the head safe from the world. And this guy knew exactly where the head was kept. It was underneath the altar in a special secret chamber that only the Knights Templar could get to, and then any priest that worked there afterwards. And he had it down to blueprints. He was absolutely convinced this is where it was. So we based an entire show on this. He knew we couldn't actually get the head of Christ, but we figured it's a good story. I was there shooting Roslin Chapel after hours, and I was getting some B-roll, and the custodian came over to talk to me and said, "We got to leave in 10 minutes. What are you shooting? What's the crazy story this time?" I tell him that story. He goes, is that this year's crazy loopy paranormal story? Well, if you turn your camera off, I will show you the truth. So I turned it off, as he asked. I really wanted to keep it on surreptitiously, but he was being a nice guy to show me. He took me into the chapel after hours, and he took me down this door behind the altar. It went down and twisted down literally right underneath the altar, and there was this wooden door there that I hadn't seen before because I couldn't get down that far anyways. And he goes, "Okay, do you want to see the head of Christ?" And he opened the door, and there was a sink, a bucket, and a mop.
Oh my goodness.
That's where he put all his rakes and all his lawn equipment in and locked it up and closed it. And he says, "There's your head of Christ."
Wow.
So once again, the absence of evidence somehow becomes evidence. And this guy based an entire book and somehow got a publishing deal based on it with the flimsiest of evidence.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was just a janitor's closet.
I mean, that's actually true for a lot of people's careers. I mean, not everyone, but I know a few. I know a few people who their careers are just based on a bunch of lies.
Yes, yes, I
So
know.
yeah, and they're getting some of them are getting more famous by the minute, and more sycophants.
They'll
It's
just
just really
exactly. They'll just
crazy,
find more lies to weave around the lies, and they'll just stay one head of lies.
right?
Because the truth is, we don't know as much as we think we do. And if one guy comes across and talks like they've done they're studying, often that's enough
Hmm.
for people to believe them and follow. And that's what so much of this history and archaeology and paranormal stuff is all about.
Yeah, and well, I mean, to make this about me, because everything's about me. I just posted the most fake picture of old time. Everything's fake. My skin is fake. My neck is fake. My collarbone's fake. My eyelash is fake. And I say, keep it real. And then this is the most real interview I've ever done of all time. Wearing a very like 20-plus-year-old American University shirt. My hair's not done. You're getting the real me. You know why? Because I wanted to have a real conversation and hear the real truth from you. So that's the
Oh, well,
truth of the day.
I'm touched. You picked me. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, really. I mean, I've been doing everything in character, but I wanted to have a real conversation as one version of me. So anyway, back to you. Now, you called yourself, this is not my titling for you, a queer producer. So you've been
Hmm.
traveling, as you said, a queer producer around the world and
Hmm.
exploring gay life. In the present day, of course, you still have one foot in the present day versus the ancient
A
world,
little
which
bit.
you also explore, right? Now, what are some of the differences between the gay lifestyles now versus ancient day?
I mean, they're exponentially different in many ways. One of my favorite places in all of Egypt, which is definitely my happy place where I go to a lot, in Saqqara, which is south of the Giza Plateau, we're just talking about, where the step pyramid is. If you know photos like that, there's a necropolis, and one of the tombs there is called the Tomb of the Brothers, and it was found in the 1960s, and it got that moniker because when they opened it, it was these images of these two men they were clearly not brothers, unless they were Siamese twins, which actually was an argument by some people. That's why they were so close. That's why they
Hmm.
couldn't leave each other. But what this was two gay men that had
Huh.
died in the fourth dynasty Egypt, which is again about 4,500 years ago, and they took it on with these clearly were two men in love. They clearly
Wow.
were sanctified by the pharaoh to allow to have this elite tomb built there, and it's the most loving, beautiful tomb of these two men embrace. Egyptian form of kissing is nose to nose, not lip to lip. So all over this
Mm.
beautiful tomb of these men nose to nose, images of them fishing, images of them hanging out, barbecuing, and sitting on
What?
lotuses on the Nile. It is the most lovely, wonderful um, ode to gay love I've ever seen. And clearly, once again, it was sanctioned by the government, or it wouldn't have allowed to be this way. And it shows you how far we came that when they
Hmm.
opened in 1964, homophobia had already reared its head, so they couldn't possibly be
Mm.
gay guys. They had to be brothers. And I wasn't
Very
joking about
interesting.
the Siamese twin thing. People,
Right.
one theory was that the only reason they were so close was they physically could not tear themselves away from one another. So in many regards, it was much better back in the day. In ancient
Right.
Greece, Rome, Egypt, there was no word
Hmm.
for gay. There was no word for queer. It was just something you did. I mean, there had different parameters as you went along. Which act you took in bed became a very important thing in more masculine Roman times.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of homosexuality, it was just a thing. It was just live your own life,
Right.
and it wasn't until Christianity came along in the fourth century that they started erasing that and calling it decadent. So, in many
Interesting.
ways, we've taken many steps back with gender equality, with
Yeah.
homosexuality.
I think we'll leap forward here. I have two questions for you since I have a master, kind of famous, very experienced historian here. So, what do you think of my theory that maybe the kissing was nose to nose and not mouth to mouth due to the dental advances that weren't there yet? They're like, you know what?
Well, it
They
is
went
true.
to
I
go
mean,
look good, and then they go,
I
boom.
write a book as yeah, we didn't talk about my time travel books, but one of the I have a film crew that goes back and they time travel, and one of the things they talk about is like all the terrible breath and the terrible teeth that people must have had then. Now the Egyptians did have
Hmm.
toothbrushes; they were just twigs, but they did have toothbrushes. But conversely, if you look at a lot of the tombs of the pharaohs, the mummies, a lot of them died because of tooth infections gone bad. So they had no great dental care where they fixed things. So your mouth was probably a terrible, terrible mess in the ancient world. So yes, you could sleep
Yeah.
whoever you want with, but you'd have the most awful breath and the most terrible pain in your cavities that you probably wish you could jump to our age and get fixed.
Well, maybe that's more reason to have sex because it could help anesthetize the pain, which they couldn't get rid of in their mouth. I don't know,
I don't think people
whatever.
ever needed a reason to have sex. I don't think that was ever a problem. People always found a way.
Due to dental pain, my root canal's hurting me, Dr. Feldman. I need to have sex
Exactly.
right
Take
now.
my mind off of this.
All right, next question now. We got to
Just
get
no
to your
French
book.
kissing.
No French kissing, but maybe Egyptian kissing. Ha ha ha. No, so no. So now, you're
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of
currently
nose action.
so you're currently publishing your first novel, Primetime Travelers. Primetime Travelers. It's about
Correct.
a feckless band of TV producers who time hop back to ancient times and mess around with history, from Pompeii and Troy to the Egyptian underworld. So, what can readers look forward to?
I think that sort of sums it up nicely, I guess, because I wrote it, so I encapsulated all as
Ah.
much as I could. But it clearly is based on a lot of things we've been talking about, but it's a comedic way with great adventure and a little Indiana Jones touch of me to kind of mess with stories. For after 25 years of being a documentary filmmaker and having to debunk, here I can kind of just play and go wild with fiction and make time traveling romp. But still, I know these worlds so well. So when they go back to Pompeii, for example, in the second book, it's all about them trying to get out in the 24 hours. And I describe exactly what the eruption 79 AD was like to the letter because I did all the research. And do they fiddle with time and save somebody and mess with fate, or do they leave people go? Each book has a gay love story of some kind. The first book is about them taking the 12 hours of the Egyptian underworld. They call it the Duat. So
Mm.
basically, if you ever go into a tomb in Egypt, if you see all these strange signs on the wall and these pictures, these are all basically a guide for the pharaoh or the elite to follow so they can take the 12 gates and negotiate them smoothly and then rise with the sun the next day. Because each of these gates has a goblin or a demon that tries to trip you up and not let you get beyond there. And then
Wow.
you do not rise, and then you never get to the field of reeds, heaven, and then you are forever a mummy wandering in hell. That's what this book is about. So it's a film crew going through these
Ah.
12 gates, trying to win an
Huh.
Emmy. But we get a chance to show what the 12 gates of the Egyptian underworld like at the same time. Some make it, some don't.
I interviewed someone, Marcus Mera, who invented a video game, and I could see this as a video game. So just think about it.
Others have said it's very video, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
clearly it's a journey. Each one is a journey, and Pompeii. I'm over here in Turkey writing the third book about Troy. So they
Hmm.
time hop back to ancient Troy and they get inside the horse. So we have a film crew inside the Trojan horse for the first time in history. So I'm playing with all those things, and they're very visual, and do lend themselves to both graphic novels and games and I think anything very colorful and visual. So, put me in touch with your man. We'll talk.
Yeah, I will actually. He's worked with, I think, it's the first video game creators of all time back in, I want to say it's like 1980, 84. So he has some good connections, but we'll talk about that off camera.
Okay, he's
So you have
pretty venerable then.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't want to suggest you meeting someone who's a waste of your time. He's created great things, great things. Marcus Mara, shout out. We still have to meet up. I'm too busy. Anyway, and also respect to you. I'll talk to him off camera. Okay, so we have
Okay,
1.5 minutes left. 1.5 minutes left.
throw one more at me
Um,
then.
yes. Now, what's your take on the state of indie writing, indie or either indie writing or indie TV production, indie movies? While the cable TV and traditional publishing is dying off, like, what do you think is happening right now?
I mean, it is all dying off, and that's
Mhm.
we need more than a minute and a half, 90 seconds to talk about it, but
Yes,
it's
yes.
collapsed completely. And it is we are in the rise of the independent, the individuals who are making films, who are writing books, who are making the video games, whatever else, and then doing the marketing themselves, which I'm doing with these books. I decided I got indie with these because there was too much interference from the traditional publishing. One of them liked it, but they want to get rid of all the queer stuff. They thought it wouldn't sell, in
What?
Poughkeepsie or something. I don't know. So
Okay.
it's a lot of work, but it is the way of the future, I think, because each person gets to own their own work, their own property, and the networks are collapsing. Discovery Channel, where I worked for 12 years, my channel died just
Yeah.
today. A&E let go 100 of my friends, History Channel and National
Oh.
Geographic let go 80 or 90 people last month. It is the end of that era that I became such a big part of for the last 3 decades. And a lot of people are scratching their heads and saying, where to next? And those things
Mhm,
are not
mhm.
coming back. We're not going to
Mhm.
go back to 62 channels and $1 million budgets for shows. There's going to be
Yeah.
these scrappy independent productions that people self-fund, and like you're doing with this, the radio piece, or people doing
Yeah.
podcasts, you get the
Mhm.
word out that way, and that is where the fan base comes. And what that does is get rid of the middle person completely. So it's both good and bad, I think, but it is the
Right.
way forward. We're not going back to that model ever again.
1,000%. I'll add to this. I ran into someone who lives down the street who works for Newsday, and he just told me and my dad that 210 people were laid off at Newsday just recently. So to end this,
Mm-hmm.
we could go on. You have so much info, so interesting. Please tell our listeners where to find you, website, social media. How can they find you?
Absolutely. Well, Primetime Travelers, the first book, the one that takes place in Egypt, is already out on Amazon. So if you just go to Amazon and Google Neil Laird or Primetime Travelers, it'll pop up. And then Primetime Pompeii, I was just looking at the final cover art today for the book. That should probably come out in the fall. And then neillairdcom, you can sign up for my newsletter and get all the information about when it's coming out. And if you want to be part of my ARC team, my advanced reader copy team for Troy, you could do that right now, and I will put you on the list.
Beautiful. Well, congrats on all your hard work. I hope it pays off continuously and very smart mindsets. I'm going to have to listen back to this interview to learn some things because there are so many details that definitely just whiz past and didn't get
And I'm
in
a
here.
fast talker. Forgive me. So
No, I
I
love
probably
it.
slurred a lot of words in my.
No, no, no. No, no. But when I'm in host mode, I don't absorb everything as I do when I'm in listener mode. It's totally different. So, anyway, you have a wonderful time in Turkey. Stay safe, stay cool. It's very hot there. We can talk about the weather another time. No, we can't. Talk to you
Yes.
later. And back to
All
you,
right.
Mark, in the studio.
Cheers.